The 6 most overpaid free agents of 2021 free agency. What's up, fellas? My name is Tucker. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like rating on it. Check out my socials right there. Let's go and get started. Okay, number 1 on the list is one of the highest paid free agents of the entirety of this offseason, and it's Chris Paul. Might be a bit of a surprise here. 4 years, 120 for some people might seem fair for Chris Paul. And granted, for the first 2 seasons, it probably is. But overall, this is too much money for Chris Paul in terms of the value he's going to return to the team for the entirety of the contract. I have full confidence that Chris Paul is going to be a great player next year, probably the year after that as well if he stays healthy. But as he continues to get older, he's already the best aging old small guard in league history. And he can't continue to push that, right? Like, there's no way that Chris Paul at 37, 38 is going to continue to be as effective as he has been over the last couple of seasons that has now earned him this 4-year, $120 million contract. And so it's no disrespect to Chris Paul. It's honestly no disrespect to the Phoenix Suns, because guess what? They had to do it. And as soon as Chris Paul started to play as well as he did this year, they knew he was going to be a free agent. They knew that they were going to have to pay for the guy. And I think everybody's on the same page that 4 years, 120 is too much for Chris Paul for the entirety of the contract. But for this team, for where they're at, for what they did this season and how they need to continue to produce at that level and hopefully continue to make some finals, they need Chris Paul on the roster, and this is just kind of the going rate for guys like Chris Paul. Somebody would have paid him this, but that doesn't change the fact that, in my opinion, certainly overpaid, if one of the most overpaid, if not the most overpaid free agent in the offseason. Next up, we have 2 New York Knicks on the list. I think this first guy, a lot of people are going to have on their list, and the second guy, maybe not so many people. Evan Fournier, 4 years, 78. Nerlens Noel, 3 years, 32. Let me explain each of them. Fournier, it's a similar situation. He was going to get this from somebody. He was a borderline $20 million a year guy on the free agency market, can create, can shoot, on or off ball player, not going to be able to defend super well, but he's having a good Olympics, and he was going to be a guy that was going to get some money. And for a Knicks team that needed perimeter creation, they needed playmaking in the backcourt, that just made sense, that combination of player and team. And in the long run, it's not the worst contract of all time, but I do think that it's too much money, especially in a Knicks situation where they'll probably be a playoff team next year, but I don't expect them to be contending towards the top of the conference. And then Nerlens Noel, 3 years, 32, might not sound like a lot, but when you go around the league and you look at the different big guys, you kind of have to be one of 3 things. You have to either be someone that doesn't make a ton of money, you're on a 1-year deal, JaVale McGee type guy that is just out there, rebounds, protects the rim, runs to the rim, and you're making $5-6 million on short deals. Or you have to be someone like Clint Capella that's making 15-16, but incredibly impactful on the defensive end, a notch above those minimum level guys defensively, great rebounder, rim roller as well. Or you have to be Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic that are offensive focal points that run everything for their teams, and then in Embiid's case is a defensive player of the year caliber guy, and then somewhere in between all that is someone like Rudy Gobert's defensive player of the year caliber guy, but not an offensive focal point, right? Those are kind of the 3 categories of bigs, and Noel, at making just over $10 million a year, is more on the side of guys that just roll the rim, defend the rim, and that's about it. But he's not on the level of someone like Clint Capella, despite the fact that he's in between those 2 ranges money-wise. So what I'm saying is, even though New York had cap space to spend, this is an overpay for Noel, because you could have gotten any number of big guys on the market that do 80% of what Nerlens Noel does for half, if not less than, the price. That's the only point there with the big guys. It's just kind of a general rule now at this point with big guys in free agency. Next up, DeMar DeRozan, 3 years, 85. I praised Chicago a lot for their offseason in their video when I talked about DeMar ending up in Chicago. And as a whole, what Chicago did where they added Caruso, Lonzo Ball, DeMar DeRozan, all 3 of those guys with just $20 million in cap space, the logistics of all of it, the sign and trade stuff, I really like the addition of Lonzo, all that stuff. Praise to the Chicago Bulls for that. But on an individual basis, do I think DeMar DeRozan is a player that's worth $28 million a year on a 3-year, $85 million deal? No, I don't. Obviously not a perfect player. We all understand the flaws that come along with DeMar DeRozan when it comes to not being a floor spacer, being one of the better mid-range scorers in the league, improving as a playmaker over the years, but still not being a plus defender or a plus spacer. And there's just other guys around the league that I would rather spend $28 million on. Now, for Chicago specifically, the situation that they're in, where they'd already gotten Lonzo, they'd already gotten Caruso, they'd spent their cap space. There was no other way for them to bring in a player of this caliber. it makes sense. And there are situations where it's okay to overpay for a player. We've talked about the Chris Paul thing, and I think this DeRozan situation for Chicago, team that has not been very successful over the last couple of seasons and has plenty of incentives to try and be successful over the next couple of seasons, with Zach LaVine being an impending free agent next year. It's okay to overpay. And this is one of those scenarios, but it doesn't change the fact that in terms of the value and the production that DeMar DeRozan is going to return to this team, it is, in my opinion, a pretty significant overpay. Second to last now on the list, DeVonte Graham, 4 years, 47. This is not getting that much attention, apart from some negative stuff about the Pelicans that I've already mentioned before. And this one's tough because I like DeVonte Graham, and 2 years ago is a really, really cool story in the race for most improved, but there's a lot of flaws to DeVonte Graham's game to the point where he really wasn't that big a part of their team last year in Charlotte, and he's just a very weird offensive player. He's a smaller guard, not going to be able to defend particularly well, is a high-volume three-point shooter whose efficiency has waned at certain times. He doesn't get to the rim, and he's pretty much just a really high-volume, off-the-bounce or off-ball shooting three-point guy that has a tendency to go into significant slumps. And the reason that he had such a good year 2 years ago when he was most improved, or in the running for most improved player of the year, was that his efficiency was up there for a good part of the year, and then it kind of trailed off at the end of the year. Now, granted, the difference in the situations in Charlotte 2 years ago compared to New Orleans this upcoming season are significant. He won't have to do a lot of on-ball creation. Maybe he's just a Seth Curry level shooter that is going to go out there and he's going to shoot 8 threes a game and he's going to make 3.5 of them. And quite frankly, that's pretty good value for 4 years, 47. But based off what we've seen out of DeVonte Graham over the last couple of seasons, he's not a guy that should have warranted this level of a contract, and for the Pelicans to give up a first-round pick in order to trade for DeVonte Graham. That Seth Curry comparison, Seth is bigger. He is a better guy when it comes to these dribble handoffs that Philadelphia likes to run. He's a really significant part of their offense, and DeVonte Graham has a long way to prove that he is that level of a player, will be that level of a player in New Orleans. They obviously need spacing, but I would prefer to have a spacer that is bigger and can defend a little bit rather than, quite frankly, a shooting specialist that isn't as efficient as you'd like him to be, especially as a smaller guard. Last up now on the list is another big guy, and it's Richaun Holmes, 4 years, 55. The case here is going to be very similar to what we talked about with Nerlens Noel. Where do you fall as a big guy? Are you a 1 year minimum-ish, mid-level exception-ish level guy? Are you Clint Capella, or are you Joel Embiid? Richaun Holmes is being paid like someone that's closer to Clint Capella while not being that caliber of player. Richaun Holmes is a fine player. He's good. There's a reason that he earned this contract, and it's not incredibly prohibitively expensive. And Sacramento obviously wanted to retain him because they have no idea what they're going to do with their front court, given the issues that Marvin Bagley has had to this point in his career. They needed a front court player. Richaun Holmes was a half-decent option for them to bring in, or bring back, I should say. But again, one of the most efficient ways you can spend money in the NBA is at the 5 spot. There's so many guys out there. In contrast to the guards and wings, where everybody is looking for the guys that can guard, that can shoot, that don't need the ball in their hands, there's not enough of those guys. But there's too many bigs that are rebounders, can roll to the rim, can protect the rim a little bit, and are just kind of out there. There's a lot of those guys, so you can get pretty good value for a good player without having to give up a ton of money. So anytime you're giving up a ton of money for someone like Richaun Holmes or someone like Nerlens Noel when you don't really need to, it's just going to be viewed as an overpay. That's just kind of how it works. But these are the 6 most overpaid guys for me in this offseason. Honestly, not that egregious. I mean, the guys that are getting overpaid are big-name guys, Chris Paul, DeMar DeRozan. There's no Joakim Noah to the Knicks signings on here. Honestly, there's not even anything on here that is on par with the Gordon Hayward signing from last year, although that one I think probably will work out relatively well for Charlotte moving forward. There's no Al Horford here on this list, so I think teams have generally been pretty smart, but there's always going to be an overpay from every offseason. In the long run, maybe it's Paul, maybe it's DeRozan, maybe it's someone that's not even on this list, but it happens every year. This year, though, not as egregious as it typically is in certain off seasons. So good job by NBA teams on that front. Really quickly, before we end the video, tomorrow, probably going to be the longest video in the history of this channel. I'm just going to give free agency grades for every single team in the entire league. It might be a half an hour long video. That would be a minute per team. But regardless, we're going to make it happen. Be on the lookout for that video tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you guys very much for watching. Let me know down in the comment section below who you guys think some of the most overpaid players of this offseason were. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like rating on it. Check out my socials right there as well. Check out the boxes on screen for more videos from me. Consider subscribing for more NBA content every single day. And yeah, like I said, hope you guys have an awesome rest of your Friday. Enjoy your weekend, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Peace, fellas.